And we've got Grant Abbott, and Grant Abbott is going to be chatting to us a little bit about what he thinks of the minister's briefing right there. A very good morning to you, Grant Abbott. Firstly, let's start with Fort Hare. Do you think that the minister's plan goes far enough to stabilize what's happening out at Fort Hare, which is, to all intents and purposes, one of the most iconic institutions in higher education in South Africa?
Good morning, and good morning to your viewers, and thank you for having me. I agree with you. It is definitely one of the most iconic institutions that we have, and so what we've seen over the last few weeks is incredibly disturbing, and we need to do everything we can to get the university back into a proper place. The minister's plan is possible, but only in one sense, and that is that the University Council management needs to start meaningful engagement with stakeholders, students, SRC, convocation, and of course trade unions. This is one of the biggest criticisms we have had with management of that institution in particular, is that for whatever reason the Vice-Chancellor doesn't seem to believe that stakeholder engagement is possible or is necessary. And that is deeply disturbing in a democratic institution, a democratic South Africa. So to restore the university back to what it should be in terms of teaching and learning, a safe environment for students and for workers, there has to be essentially a change in attitude from management side, that it starts engaging with the stakeholders meaningfully.
Grant Abbott, as the General Secretary of the Union, of the National Tertiary Education Union, do you believe that the Vice-Chancellor stepped into a place that was already inherited massive challenges there? Do you believe that those are what we're experiencing now are continuations of the same challenges, or have new ones erupted since he took over a few years ago?
Yeah, he certainly stepped into an institution that had deep problems, and there was much positivity around the fact that he would be able to turn the institution around. Sadly, though, and I don't say this with any joy, but it does seem that he never possessed the abilities as a leader to get the right team around him. The people that he chose to bring in to help him, we now see have all been themselves arrested. And this is one of the big critical things with the tenure of this Vice-Chancellor, is that he chose to bring in people of questionable character, to say the least, and all of those people who have been recently arrested in the ongoing court battles there are people that were employed and came in under his tenure. So while he inherited a problem, unfortunately it seems that he further exacerbated that problem and allowed deep corruption to take root because of poor decision-making as a leader there. And I think that's what sparked a lot of the outcry now. It's been too long. He needs to essentially vacate that position, because it's been proven over the last 7 years of his tenure that he's unable to fully turn that institution around.
You mentioned a little bit about some of the failings possibly being effective stakeholder engagement. Can you share more about what you mean by that?
So, you know, there is the white paper on transformation in higher education, which is the 1997 white paper. That paper speaks about institutions, the democratization of institutions, the transformation of institutions, and critical to all of that is proper stakeholder engagement. We have multiple times written to the Vice-Chancellor, to Council, and we get radio silence from there. We get better responses from the Department of Higher Education and from the Portfolio Committee on matters that directly affect the university, that the university can resolve it. And the Vice-Chancellor doesn't engage. Let me give you an example, a lot of what we've seen in the last week could have been avoided. In fact, it was completely avoidable because a month ago, around about the 6th of September, there was a peaceful protest that was organized by involving all communities, a community-based protest in the vicinity of Alice. A letter, a memorandum of demands was handed over. Some of those were already mentioned by the Minister in his press briefing now. And instead of responding to those, the thing that we would expect a leader to do would be to call the leaders of stakeholders and say, let's engage in these issues that affect you in particular. He didn't do that. What he did was he just summarily said, we're not going to respond to those. How do you expect people to respond?
Yeah, no, I hear that. In fact, let's go back a little bit to what's happening on the ground in Fort Hare and what the Vice-Chancellor and his current management would have inherited, which speaks to really to corruption, procurement irregularities, challenges in that particular space. In fact, the Minister himself, Manamela, did mention that it seems as if service providers and businesses seem to think that universities are a staging ground for expanding their businesses, if not starting their businesses. What do you say to that as the union?
No, I think that's obviously not correct in one sense. All right, so the university is not there to be a cash cow, to be a place that is an enrichment place for businesses. But on the flip side as well, it has to be a place where the community is better off as a result of the university being there. And when I say that, I'm not saying that every local business in the area must get a tender. That's not at all what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that the community would be happy because the university is there, because it's providing the necessary training and education for students close by, and jobs for people who are within the area. It's not a scenario where you need to go out on a massive national tender to, for example, procure transport services for students from one campus to the other. The Alice campus and the East London campus of Fort Hare being about an hour drive from each other. Surely you can look at local suppliers to provide such a service. It's not about the enrichment of the community. It's about using the resources that are available to provide the services, or using the local resources that are available to provide the services that are needed to deliver quality tertiary education. And I think those do exist within the vicinity by and large.
So, taking what you've just said and looking at the DHET's audit findings, do they point to a systemic problem? Looking at that multi-layered approach that you just spoke about, where the primary focus, of course, is to educate and uplift through education. The second, or maybe even tertiary layer there, would be to then look for local communities to help support the university in some of its operational needs. The audit findings from the DHET, do they point to a systemic problem in that kind of scenario that you just painted the universities needs to be looking to operate in?
I would think so, to some degree. There's a systemic problem within universities that they have become this captured, as I said before, I've used the term before, university capture, where people are brought into the institution. If we look again just at the Fort Hare scenario, there's 172 million rand unaccounted for in terms of corruption, and that is being unearthed in the various court arrests, and we look forward to when that court case proceeds. But the systemic problem is when you have leadership brought into the institution who then bring in their friends and their providers and people that they know and bypass proper procurement processes. Even, I would say, this Vice-Chancellor himself has done that. East London is a metro city, for example. Why would they need to go out and get lawyers from Johannesburg or Cape Town to deal with their cases. It makes very little sense to me. So there's a systemic problem in the sense that once a vice chancellor or management gets into an institution, they hide behind this thing of institutional autonomy to say that you can't hold us accountable, and then it's almost as though they start behaving like it is their own private business, which unfortunately it looks like Buhlungu has done with Fort Hare. And that is what we need to question, what we need to pull back and say, this is not your private business. This is an institution to train the next generation of leaders, and let's look at focusing our attention around that.
Grant, we run out of time, but I just do want to clarify, is it a sector-wide issue that we're talking about here, that they are captured, as you said, or is it specific out of the 26 universities that do have these challenges? Because the sector is quite wide and quite varied as well.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's sector-wide. As in, obviously, not every institution is captured and corrupt per se, but you do see in various places where this has happened. I think the minister was referring to the issue of the University of the Free State in his statement. We know, for example, the last day or so, there's been now headlines coming out that the University of Limpopo has been is in contempt of court for having not complied with a particular court order there. We got DUT crises happening. The portfolio committee has been in KZN. So, yeah, we're talking about a lot more.
We're going to have to leave it there, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you so much for that. Obviously calls for a deeper conversation. Thank you very much for that conversation. We are talking right there to the General Secretary of the National Tertiary Union, Grant Abbott. And we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you so much.